Welcome to the live show. I'm your host, Adam Quiney. I'm talking to this microphone right here. I listen to stuff through that earpiece. I drink tea out of this cup right here. We talk about things related to leadership. What a wonderful world. Sometimes I say things that are funny on this show. Sometimes I say things that make people laugh. Just going to check, make sure that these streams are streaming to all the streamy places. I can see me on Facebook. There I am. Excellent. That's where I like to see myself. Let's check LinkedIn. How's Adam Quiney doing on LinkedIn? We're showing a live stream. We got any viewers there? If I click on see all activity, oh yeah, there I go. I'm live. Cool. With really grainy footage, which is I don't like the grainy footage, but what are you gonna do? Maybe maybe I have to work with that. On Facebook, it actually looks quite crisp and clear. So, and it seems like so I've upgraded this plan. I'm using the platform Restream, which lets me broadcast out to multiple places all at once: Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. That's it. Maybe there's more that are available. I'm not sure. I also notice I've got an expanded field of view for this video. It's quite large. So now they tell me, good day, watch this too, Megan. I can feature you. Wha-bam. Here you go. Good day, sir, says Megan. How'd you like that? Was it nice to be featured? Hide that. Don't show that stupid thing. Hey, Megan. What's up, Andrew? Good to see you too. Let's get your name up here too. Boom. You're featured. That's Andrew Mundy right there. Now I'll hide you again. Well, it's a bit of a cloudy day over here, quite overcast, which is a blessed relief because it's been 6 billion degrees because of the heat dome spell that some ancient wizard cast on us here in the island. Not really an ancient wizard. All of us are ancient wizards, and we have used climate change and caused some severe problems, and now we're trying to solve that. In the meantime, it's really, really hot. But not right now. Right now, the temperature's cooled way down. We have a bunch of overcast clouds. It's really kind of nice. And I'm hoping for a bit of rain, just not when I want to be outside. And the other thing that I'll share by way of kind of coming onto the show today is my knee is really hurt because I played, this game has the worst name. So I'm going to give you a bit of backstory. I'll tell you the name of the game first, which is Pickleball, a game called Pickleball. So my background in sports, I played soccer for many, many years as a kid. And then I got into squash, which was a deep, deep, deep love for me. I really loved that sport and played it extensively. But squash is, well, first of all, squash is one of the most demanding sports calorically. After boxing, boxing is the #1 calorie burner, and then squash is #2. It's a very high intensity game, and the saying as you play squash at higher and higher levels is you don't play squash to get fit, you get fit to play squash. So it's not a sport that is particularly kind on your body. And as I age and continue to have a body, I've not let that go yet, my joints, my back especially, start to like really be like, hey, you shouldn't keep doing this. Don't keep hinging on this thing. Hey, Anna, nice to have you with us. And so I've been looking for other sports, other racket sports to play primarily because I love racket sports. Really fun for whatever reason. And tennis never really got me. And so, but the game that did was pickleball. Pickleball is played on a smaller version of a tennis court. And the best way I can think of the game, the sport, is that it's kind of like you're playing ping pong, but you're standing on the table. So the racket is a paddle as opposed to a strung racket. So it's actually like a piece of carbon fiber these days I use, but it could just easily be wood. You play with a wiffle ball, and then you hit the ball back and forth. And it's actually a pretty awesome sport. The name belies the competitive nature. Like there's actually exercise and a sport involved in this game, as opposed to when I heard pickleball, I was like, fuck this thing. this is a stupid game that you play when you're drunk. But it's not. So anyhow, I went for a lesson for the first time on Tuesday, and then yesterday my friend Davin and I went to have a hit, and it's been quite some time since I've played any racket sports. And so of course the tendons in my body are not, the tendons and the surrounding supportive muscles are not used to this kind of movement. But I have years and years, decades even, of playing squash ingrained in my head and in my muscle memory. So I know the movement, I know how to place myself and move around the court really well, but my physicality is not there. And consequently, as I do so, I might make a stand or lunge into something in such a way that I know about it. I can remember doing it, but my body's like, yo, we can't support this. So my knee started to get kind of painful. And today it feels a little bit like, your knee bends linearly along its joint. It's a linear, as opposed to like your shoulder, which is sort of circular in its movement. Knee bends linearly. It feels like I might have twisted it or torqued a little bit. So nothing serious. I stopped playing as soon as I felt that, I was like, all right, we got to stop playing. But I can feel it swollen and it doesn't feel great to move it. So I'm just taking it easy while that happens. Andrew, it looks like you injured your knee too. What did you do? Good morning, Tommy. Your son did that guerrilla technique that sons did, where they leave landmines for you. He left a plastic screw on the staircase and it blended in with the stair color. Needless to say, I bailed down a few stairs. Boy, oh boy, kids, hey. The things they put parents through. Megan, who you saw earlier, who I featured, was over at our place, and she and her husband Ian were sharing how when they didn't have kids, they'd see children in public making a huge row and thinking like, what have those horrible parents done to that kid? And now with kids, they think, what is that horrible child doing to those parents? It makes complete sense to me. I have a new game that I'm going to share. This is the part of the show where we share the fun stuff and then we get into the leadership. So if you're here for the leadership, try to have a bit of fun first. And if you're here for the fun, I'm getting that out of the way so you can enjoy this. This is Dale of Merchants. Dale, like Duke of Earl, but Dale of Merchants. This is a new game that I bought. They sent me two. So this one is going as a gift to my friend Graham, who also plays a lot of board games with me. This is a deck builder style game. I'm very excited to play it, and it's very cute. And the premise of the game is that you are one of, I think there's like 15 different factions of animals, cute furry animals, like the sly ocelot, or the sneaky lizards, or the kind, open-hearted kittens. And then you're trying to do something. It's a deck builder style game. If you ever hear me talk about deck builders, those are primarily the style of games that I find the most fun. I really like that. What would you call that? That mechanic in a game, as opposed to like other mechanics that I like would be like resource management games. I find quite fun. So a resource management game, primarily what you're trying to maximize in the game is like, okay, I can put all of my energy, my resources into building new buildings, or I can put a lot of my resources into extracting value from those buildings, or I can put a lot of resources into hiring more people who could then work in those buildings. And you're trying to figure out, like, given where the game currently is, what's the best option and how do I maximize that? So that's another style mechanic in game design that I quite like a lot. Hey, Adam, nice to see you. Oh boy, Tommy's had 2 medial meniscus tears. That sounds fun, but I know it's not. Tear is never something I want to hear. I'm waiting. It cannot be too far off where exoskeleton technology becomes a viable. And I don't know Anno Games. Is that the designer for this? No, this is Snowdale. Tell me more about. Share Anna in the comments. Anna's just asked this, and I'm not totally sure what she means by Anno Games. So share about that with me. I'm really intrigued by exoskeleton technology, which would be sort of something that would fit, loosely around either the outside of your pants, or I guess maybe we all start wearing cargo pants, then we can wear it on the inside, but that just supports your joints a little bit more, so that as you age, it takes off some of the weight placed on your knee and allows it to be part of this exoskeleton that we can wear. And at least in theory, this would be something you could, if we're not yet at the point where we just have robots doing stuff like warehousing, it would be something warehouse workers could wear, and then it would allow them to lift more, because they're not just lifting with the strength of their own knee and their own back and stuff. The exoskeleton can assist them. It can add strength, or it can support them so that their back's not bearing all the weight. That seems to me like it should be quite close, but Andrew asked a really great question. I was going to go into this, but no one asked, and now you have, Andrew, so I appreciate it. And I'm not familiar with Anno Games. I name something that they've made. Oh, is Anno the actual game or the designer? I'll have to check this out. Andrew asked this question. It's not a silly question, it's a great question, which is, what's the difference in a deck builder versus Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering? So Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone. Hearthstone's a digital game. Magic the Gathering is mostly digital these days, but it was originally based on you'd buy cards to build a deck with. So often people think, oh, deck builder, that's like Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering is what's called a collectible card game, a CCG. In a collectible card game, you collect the cards, and then before the game starts, you build your deck. So you show up to a game of Magic the Gathering with a already built deck of 60 cards usually. In some formats 40, doesn't really matter. So you have your deck, and your deck does not by and large change throughout the course of the game. It's set once you begin the game. Your cards can get used and be discarded. They can return to your hand. Sometimes because of a card you play, they get like put in a special place where they're removed from the game. Sometimes they get brought back in. But the contents of your deck from start to finish largely remain the same. There's nothing new added or taken out. A deck builder is a game where part of the game includes adding cards, like actually building your deck. So in Magic the Gathering, aside from the fact that you build your deck before you start, once the game has begun, there is no element of building a deck involved. That is now finished. It's your deck is set in stone from the moment you begin the deck. In a deck builder, a large part of the game comes from building your deck as you go. So the way deck builders typically work is you usually start with 10 cards in a deck, which are pretty crappy. They're not great cards. And then every turn you play, you are usually able to do some kind of action that allows you to take a card from somewhere and then add that into your deck so that in subsequent turns, now you will draw that new card and then you can play that instead of the crappy cards you started with. So the primary difference between those two is that in a game, a collectible card game, there is no element of deck building once the game has begun. Whereas in a deck builder, the most common deck builder is called Dominion. The part of the fun of the game, part of what makes the game a game, is that you're actively building your deck as you go. And that introduces a bunch of really interesting dynamics like, you know, well, I don't want to bloat my deck. I don't want to fill my deck with 6 billion cards because I don't draw the good ones. But I also do need to add some cards to my deck that allow me to win, but get me out of the, there's a whole bunch of cool strategy there. Andrew, I remember exactly you're talking about a tavern brawl they did, which was literally, they made Hearthstone a deck builder, which was always my favorite one. And a lot of people didn't understand how it worked. And that was absolutely my most favorite tavern brawl that they did. Anna, you notice you mostly know German board games. Me too, because Germans make friggin' good board games. You guys make really, really, really good board games. Although I think the rest of the world is starting to catch up a little bit. So there's all that. I'm going to share a radio, sort of live radio show that I've come across recently. I'm going to see if I can get a link so I can put it in. Here we go. Can I share this? Share, copy link. Great. So I'm always looking for new music, and part of my background and like something I've always loved is acid jazz, funk, soul. The trouble with funk, I find, is often it has this big, big, big range. And there's a period in the early aughts, late 90s, where funky house became really popular. So house music that had a funky kind of twist. But what I found that often meant is people just made it really tweaky, or they like had awkward, terrible sounding guitar riffs and were like, it's funk. And it was like, you can't just make something shitty and then use that to call it funk. Be like, no, that's the funkiness. At least that was my experience. So anyhow, I really love those styles of music. The styles of dance that I have a pedigree in, that I used to teach, that I was trained in, are all called funk styles. Popping and locking all grew out of the funk era of music. And so anytime I can find really good funk, it's a true treat. And so I happened upon, see if I can post that. It's an Apple radio show, so you won't be able to find it outside of Apple Music. But if you do subscribe to Apple Music, one of the lead members of Incognito is a guy named Bluey. Incognito is a well-known British jazz funk, acid jazz kind of group. And he goes through and shares tons of great, great music. So if you, like me, appreciate acid jazz, funk, any of like, rare grooves, anything along those lines, it's a fantastic show. And it's really cool because he goes through and he talks about the history of this sort of music and where he like found these people, the stories that he has between these people and stuff like that. So really, really, really awesome. Highly recommend that show. Bluey. Groove Velocity Radio is the name of the show. And I think you mean you love acid jazz, but if you mean you love acid, that's cool. Me too. It's also great. There's the link right there. I've just put that across the bottom. Okay, so that's our intro. That's the stuff where we talk about the fun stuff. Now we're going to get to the heavy hitting stuff, the stuff that's going to knock your socks off and blow a hole through your shoes. Let's see, where do we begin? I'm going to talk about the editing and writing process more just because that's a bit of an update for me. And as many of you know, I've got a book. I hate coaching. Me too, Anna. Coaching is the worst. And I love it. The book, Who Do You Think You Are, that I've been writing is the extended version of the Spectrums of Being. Spectrums of Being was the book I published, sort of an alpha publish. So the way that grew is that I had done a whole bunch of writing. I was writing a book. We were planning to have the intensive here in May, right before COVID hit. And I thought, what a cool gift it would be to give people, hey, Maria, welcome. What a cool, and hey, Jess, good to see you. What a cool gift it would be to be able to give people an advanced copy of this book. That'd be really neat. And they'd kind of get this sort of limited printing of this book that would be printed in the future. So the Spectrums of Being was born from that. I took everything I'd written and flash published it. Did a very little bit of proofreading, but no real editing. And then boom, off we go. So by and large, it's pretty good, but there's a lot to add to it. And since then, I took everything I wrote and then kind of extended it. That's what became Who Do You Think You Are? And I've sent this off to the publisher. That's come back from the editor, and I've been slowly going through all of this. And so the process for that is, first, there's 3 parts to this book. Part 1 is an explanation of the ontological model that I've learned and have created. So this is not exclusively my work. It's sort of my iteration on the work that has been iterated on for people over many, 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 many years, starting all the way back to Aristotle, and then, Landmark, Accomplishment Coaching, all of these other groups. So first, we're creating like a general model so people can understand how this interacts in our lives, how being versus doing, what that even means, how that even makes sense. Because a lot of that stuff, it's talked about very nebulously, and we're like, oh, don't focus on your doing, focus on your being. And people think that means just like going and meditating, or like, oh, I just need to be okay with this, sort of positive thinking, which completely misses the mark. So part 1 of the book is creating a model for all of this, how we operate, how we work. Part 2 is kind of like breaking down 25 different characteristics, different qualities of being. We're going to do one today. One of our talks is Choose Your Own Deep Dive. So we've got some suggestions, and whatever you guys want to hear, we'll take that into account, and then we're going to step through a quality of being so you can see how all this works. Part 3 of the book is a whole bunch of ways for how to actually put this into practice. So I find a lot of the writing that exists in the world in the realm of coaching, transformation, and ontology, the study of being, fits into one of 2 categories. One category is it's all conceptual. It's all like heady. And so you can kind of like grasp it intellectually, but it never comes home and actually makes a difference in you. You never actually live into it. It just becomes this neat conversation. And you can experience this sometimes when you're around, I often find this around people that are pretty steeped in Landmark, is they have a lot of distinctions. They can talk a lot about stuff, and they get really, it's almost like they're completely disembodied. So they're this head that can tell you and talk extensively about ontological concepts, but you're like, where's the human being here? So that's one side. And then the other side is that there's not a lot of scaffolding or framework set up so that you can understand why or how this stuff exists. Instead, it's sort of just like, get on the bike, I'm going to teach you how to ride it. So you learn to ride the bike, but you don't have any understanding of like, why is it that I turn my handlebars opposite direction I want to turn just a little bit before I lean into the turn? How I don't understand why I'm doing that. And so with a bike, it's a pretty simple thing we're doing, but with leadership, coaching, transformation, there's a lot more complexity. And so having a framework that helps us get why any of this stuff is the way it is, or how it shows up, or how we work with it, can really be helpful. So I'm trying to bridge that gap. Okay, I've done a ton of setting up, laying the groundwork. Now let's talk about where we're at here. I'm slowly going through editing, and the way my writing process looks is that every morning I have an hour and a half, generally speaking, set aside. And so right now, a lot of that time is spent editing. I've got a ton of edits back from the editor, and I'm going through, I've got 25 qualities, and every day I'm going through each one of those qualities and working, rewriting, doing all that stuff. It's very intense intellectual work. And what's challenging for me is that means I'm not writing. And then I'm not writing means I'm not putting out much content, and that's edgy for me. There's a lot of fears that get driven up, like, oh, people are going to forget about me. The algorithm is going to forget it. Oh, not a lot of people have interacted with Adam's post. It's been a while since he's posted. Let's not put him in front of people. I have no idea if that's true or not. Probably is, but I don't really know. But that's my anxiety. That's my fear, is that if I don't constantly put stuff out there, I will get lost, and then people will sort of lose me, and then I'm nobody and I'm nothing. So none of that has to be true, and it may be. That either side of that is not really the issue here. It's more just for me to notice and to speak into the space that fear is live. There is like a real genuine fear that shows up for me, and that's part of the challenge of slowing down and writing a book that I find, is that I have to be willing to sit in that fear and with that fear, so that I can then do what there is to do if I want to take this book and birth it into the world in the way I choose to. I could say, fuck it, I'll just accept every edit the editor's made. I'm not going to look over them. I'm not going to proofread it. Done. Off you go to the presses. But that's not going to really be the best expression of who I am and what I'm about and what I'm committed to putting into the world. To really take this all the way across the finish line requires a bit of, I guess we'll call it like stick with itness on my part. Willingness to stay with this. It's kind of awkward. It's kind of slow. I'm afraid I'm not giving people more of what they really want, which is like more writing or whatever. I'm afraid I'm going to be forgotten, and yet this is what I must do. So that's a bit of an insight into my editing, my writing process. I definitely find editing right now the hardest part of this work because there's no feedback. It used to be that writing was fine, but publishing it was scary, because then what about the feedback I got? But now I really love publishing because I'll put something out there and people resonate with it, and that feels really good. And I've done a lot of work to become, I think, a pretty good writer. And so when people resonate, they share it or something, it's really gratifying. And now I'm back, before I was doing stuff in the dark by myself and no one was commenting, and that was kind of safe and nice. Then I learned to step beyond that and to have people respond, and that's kind of nice. And now we're back to being in the dark and no one really seeing very much of the work that I'm doing, and it's kind of lonely. It's a bit challenging. So that's the process. Okay, it's high time we started talking about some of this stuff that you guys have asked for, some of the comments we've had. Let me just check and make sure there's none that have come in the meantime. One more comment. Great. Okay, awesome. So Jess Bird started with a really great question. I really love this, so I'm going to read it out loud. I can't feature it because I've got it pasted over here, unfortunately. I don't think I can do that. So Jessica says, when I'm given leads, I can serve people and create a successful coaching relationship. And I think what you're asking, Jess, is like, how do I? When I'm given leads, how do I serve people? How do I create a successful coaching relationship? She says, I have no clue how to go from square one of like, here's a random person, to them hiring me. I can't figure out how to be of service to people to where they want to continue the relationship in a paying coaching client relationship. I want more clients. I'm not successful. What are my top tips? Top tips. Andrew very graciously says, join Adam's creating client scores next time he runs it, if he runs it again. I'm not currently running that. That's a great suggestion, but that's okay. I'm happy to elaborate on some of this. I can coach successfully. I can't get clients. Got it. I can serve people and coach successfully, but I can't. Is that right? I can't quite read what you wrote there, Jess. INCSNT, get clients. I think what Jess is saying, and you can correct me, Jess, but it's like, I can coach really well, but how do I create clients? So really, yeah, I can't get clients. Really commonplace, most of us get stuck. And this is not purely a coaching conversation. This is an entrepreneurial conversation. And so the first thing people might hear is when we're talking about like, oh, this is a topic for coaches, and I'm not one of those, so it doesn't apply to me. I want to invite you to listen with a broader scope, because ultimately, as coach, what we're talking about here is there's the lane you're comfortable with, and then there's the stuff that's actually a part of that, but you probably don't realize it, that you're not yet comfortable with, and that feels rocky. And then for any entrepreneur, they have to do the same thing. Boy, I love making widgets and giving those to people, but I hate selling them. So how do I deal with that? And even as we get into like levels of leadership, what a lot of leaders will, like people leading organizations and stuff, a lot of leaders will just try to hire people, right? I'll just delegate this to someone. And that is the fantasy that's present in the coaching profession, is like all these people jumping out of apartment building windows to land on top of you and be like, I can get you leads. Just shared right after she'd posted this question on my what topics do you have, she'd gotten an ad that said like bold leads. Nonsense. But so there's a lot, like this operates at every level, where there's the thing we love doing, and then we've got this thing we relate to as separate. And how do we cross the gap? So we could go down a lot of paths for this. I want to provide some pretty simple distinctions for this so that people can understand fundamentally what's going on here. So fundamentally, a couple of things happen. When we have the thing we do, and then over here, separate from that, the thing called selling, that creates a distinction where, I love doing this thing, but I hate doing that thing because this thing is different from that thing. In fact, they're the same thing. Coaching someone is no different than getting to know them and being in a relationship with them and all of that sort of stuff. And the heart of all of this is what I just said, is creating relationship with people. What most people do, I'm going to see if I can get, I'm going to bring up an example here. I was just talking to someone on Instagram just today who is a perfect model for this. Here we go. So what most people do when it comes to selling is, first of all, they have a negative story about it. Creating clients, selling, whatever, they've got a bit of a disempowered relationship to it. And from a disempowered relationship to it, we do one of two things. We avoid it altogether, or we contract, we clench and try to rush through it. Just get it over with. So the kind of prototypical example of that would be the person who just picks up the phone and like bulldozes people, just like, fuck it, I'm just going to call and I'm going to call and I'm going to call and I'm going to get through this. They're doing the thing. So you could be like, oh, they're not avoiding it, but they're not, they're white knuckling through it. And anytime you have someone showing up with you trying to white knuckle through something, that energy comes across to us. We feel it. And we might feel it any number of ways. You might feel it in like there's no connection with them. It's just like someone trying to stick their hand down your pants, like, and create intimacy that way. Like, whoa, hold on. You haven't even asked me my name yet. Look in my eyes. Ask me what I like. Do something other than putting your hand down my pants. And that's the way most sales tends to be. And then in reaction to that, because lots of us have had that experience, people go all the way to the other side, which is, fuck it, I'm just not going to do that. And from this place, what we end up doing is just being in nice conversations with people, but it doesn't go anywhere. So this person that I'm going to read to you on my phone here, we've got a little set of stuff. This is just a conversation with someone who followed me on Instagram. So they followed me and I just wrote and said, hey, thanks for following. And they replied, no problem. And then their very next message was, hello, need cash for quarantine. Don't miss this once in a lifetime opportunity to turn $50 into 500, 100 into 1,000, 150 into 1,500, 200 into 2,000. At this point, I can keep doing the math. Why do you need to keep going in 250 into 2,500, 300 into 3? I get it. You're 10xing. Okay. So they give me a whole bunch of different numbers. You can get started right now if you got Cash App. Next message, you interested? So no connection whatsoever with me, right? They've followed me, waited, and then no problem, boom, they're right into trying to sell me something. And so I responded and said, Mitch, that's their name, take a breath. Heart, take a breath. I have no agenda, by the way, in this conversation. I'm happy to walk away from it, but I'm also like, we're all trying to do something. So the way I'm choosing to relate to Mitch is that this person is struggling. And when I think about it, I imagine someone in some country where maybe they're not as fortunate as we are here in Canada. Maybe they're not as prosperous. Maybe they don't have as many options, and they're doing their best, and they don't have any idea what to do. And so what they probably get is a lot of fuck you, and then a lot of people just shutting down. Now, I'm not trying to train them or teach them or do anything, but I'm just trying to be open with them and loving and kind. And they said, okay, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Victoria. Yourself? And they said, Canada. Next message. Hey, how you doing? Is there any possibility you may need financial help or just some extra cash? I mean, no harm, just here to help. So if you're interested in making some extra thousands, let me know. Okay. So we get the idea, right? This person really wants to 10x my income. What's missing in all of this is any kind of connection with me. So the only effort they've made to connect with me is to ask where I'm from. And then they've gone right back to selling. So absent connection, nothing can be built on top of that. Connection with someone is the foundation for everything. Now, just like, do I want to give you a metaphor here, or do I just want to speak to it? I'm just going to speak to it. That doesn't mean that all you need to do is connect with people. You can go out and connect with 1 million people, and that will not necessarily lead to clients or anything like that. That will not necessarily lead to sales. So it's not that we only need connection, but before we go anywhere else, we have to have it. It's necessary before we can advance to the next step. So first of all, most people step right over this in their hurry to finish, to get past this thing that they've got a disempowered relationship to, selling. So because they hate selling, they try to rush through it or they avoid it altogether. So the first step is, can we connect with someone? Can we connect with people? And most importantly, can we find joy in doing so? For me, this conversation with Mitch is kind of fun. Not like I want to spend all my days doing that, but like, first of all, I'm not putting a lot of energy into it. And the energy I'm putting into it is like, that's cool. I might get to make a difference for this person. I might not. It's kind of enjoyable to just be a little bit like he's on this path and I'm kind of a combo breaker a little bit. So connection. And can we, as providers of some kind of service or some kind of product, can we find joy in connecting with people? A great place to practice this is at networking events. When people hear this, the first thought they often have to me is like, fuck networking events, Adam. I hate them. Everyone's trying to sell you something, blah, blah, blah. Sure, maybe you're right. That doesn't mean, though, that you can't go and discover joy in connecting with people. So when I'm training people in this art, we'll call it, of creating a really empowered relationship to creating clients, the first thing we want to do is really get a strong foundation in connecting with other people and finding delight in doing it. So there was a point in my life where I had that same story about networking events, like, why am I here? This sucks. I hate this. And so I decided, screw this. I'm not going to play this dumb game of like trying to secretly talk about my business while not and all of that. I'm just going to connect with people. And I found that I had way more fun at these events. And other people seemed to have more fun with me too. And I would do things that didn't really follow the rules of professional networking. Like I'd go up to someone and be like, hello, would you like to professionally network with me? Just ask a question like that. And we would both laugh because it's a ridiculous thing to ask, but it's a combo breaker, right? It breaks us out of the monotony of the ordinary, of the thing we're all doing. So there's a million ways you can find fun doing this, but go to these events and just get curious about people, find delight in getting to know them. This is how we build the foundation for connecting with people. And if we can start to do that, everything else is going to flow much better because we're no longer, we have a wide open pipeline at that point. What a lot of people do is because they step over connection in a rush to do the thing that they're afraid to do, selling, they end up with very little connection. And consequently, there's a ton of significance they place on the few people they are connecting with. And then significance makes everything awkward. You're like, I really have to sell to this one person. Or, oh my God, this is the person I'm going to follow up with. And you follow up with them week after week after week, and you're needy and all of that sort of stuff. So that's how that kind of gels. I'll talk about one more thing beyond this, and then I'll make an offer for anyone that's interested. I just want to read what you guys have written here first. So Tommy says, the most connection invites I receive on LinkedIn are from people who have the magic answer to getting all of your clients in 30 days, me as well. I've taken on asking these people since they want to help coaches grow their business. Do they have a coach or have they ever worked with a coach? In 3 years, I've had one person say yes, and he named the coach. Yeah, that's the way it tends to be, right? The world is a lot of the central mythology of modern day living is get there faster. Like that's the story. That's what you should be doing. Get ahead of the pack, rush there, and do what will definitely make you money. Now, notice the foundation I just told you for becoming masterful in the art of creating clients or really enrolling people in the possibility of their lives and yours. We are setting aside needing to make money for the time being so you can really focus on finding joy in connecting with people and let that guide you as a starting point. We layer on top of that, but notice we're already breaking away from the central myth of the society we live in, which is like capitalistic, get there faster. Capitalism's not bad in and of itself. It's just problematic like anything when it becomes the only way through which we can view the world. Maria says most often sales, especially multi-level marketing, are taught that. They're not taught connection, building relationships. That is old way of networking. Maria, are you saying connecting and building relationships is an old way of networking, or that the way they do things in MLMs are an old way of networking? Just let me know. In any event, yes, that's often the way it is in a lot of MLMs. So just scroll this window. There we go. So once we have connection, the next thing we want to do is to start to create possibility in our conversation with people. Possibility is anything outside of what's already predictable for those people. So for everyone, for those of you who've seen Donnie Darko is kind of a cool indie movie put out, I think in the early aughts, somewhere thereabouts. It was really kind of creepy, a little bit weird, really neat concept. And in it, this guy started to see emanating from people this kind of translucent, like a path, basically. It was like it almost looked like a translucent smoke snake emanating out of their chest in a direction. And he would notice people would walk along this path. So there is a path for all of us, and there's a predictable set of results along that path. And whether or not they have a conversation with you, they're going to achieve those results. They don't need anything from you or really anyone else in the world. They're going to achieve it anyhow. This is the predictable nature of what people will create. Your job, once you're actually in a connected relationship with someone, is to start getting curious about what they really want to create in their life beyond that path. And so that requires asking questions that take us a little bit lower in terms of the intimacy, or a little bit deeper. And to be clear, the path of creating a client, at least a really meaningful, potent relationship with someone that we're talking about, is a path of deepening intimacy. So every step of the way, we're going to be dropping down into deeper levels of intimacy. And so what we want to do is feel into the person, like, hey, am I actually connected with this person? Or am I starting to like ask them questions like, what are you up to and what's challenging? Have you guys ever had that? Someone reaches out to you on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. You say, hey, and they're like, here, let me give you I've got another example here. I get a lot of these. Here we go. So this person wrote to me and said, hi, Visionary. I'm their name, the Visionary Coach. Thanks for connecting with me today. Sending you lots of love and success. Great, cool. Kind of a standard connection. Before I go, I would love to challenge you with this. What's keeping you away from living your best life right now? You don't have to answer, just think about it and decide to eliminate 3 of your bad habits that could really mess up with your life vision. So that's ostensibly a question designed to evoke possibility for me, right? Like what is in my way? What are 3 things that I'm doing that sabotage what I say I'm committed to? And what would be available if those 3 things weren't getting in my way? So he's asking a question that evokes some possibility for me, but he's doing it without an ounce of connection. There's no connection between us. We literally open the door and boom. So the trouble here is that what we do is we make what that guy did as wrong straight out, and then we never do it ourselves. He's not done anything wrong. he's just stepping over the foundation that we just talked about. Before he can start to be in a conversation with me where he's asking these kind of questions, he's gotta be willing to get into connection with me, and he hasn't done that. So connect with the person and then start to get curious about their life. And the way that looks is just starting to be willing to listen to your own curiosity about this person. So sometimes people will be like, yeah, I always use this example because I was at a networking event and I met a couple of guys that ran a linen company. Literally, they cleaned linen. And I was like, the first thought I had was boring, foghorn, what a boring job. But then I was like, well, hold on. Like, what brought someone into that business? What is that like day to day? What's exciting about that? What don't I know about linen? Where do you want to go in your life with this? Like, is your job, is your goal to just stay doing linen for the rest of your life, or do you want to broaden out? Like, what does someone in linen do from where you are? So these are all questions that you can tell, like, deep in the intimacy a little bit. At first, I got connected, related with them. We joked around, chatted a little bit, made fun, had a drink, whatever. Then we can start to ask these questions of each other and get curious about the person in front of us. So that's where we start to create possibility. Those are the places I would invite you to start, Jess, is like feeling into how connected am I with this person in front of me? And what am I curious about in terms of what they've shared with me? What am I curious about in terms of their possibility on this planet? Huh, you do that. How long have you done that for? Huh, how much longer do you want to do that for? Where do you end up? Like, I'm genuine. We want to find in ourselves a genuine curiosity about what they've shared with us. And if we can ask from a place of genuine curiosity, that really allows a lot to come into the space. That's part of the magic of children, is when they ask us questions, they're very disarming because there's no secret agenda. There's no sort of like, I'm asking you this question so that I can then get you, right? We're not asking the question like, where do you go with that so that I can then coach you? We're asking that question because we're genuinely curious about it. Now, for sure, as you get curious about what feels possibility, then you're going to start to hear situations where you might be able to serve them. That's the next couple of steps. But before you go there, we've got to, again, we have to build these foundational pieces one by one. So first, we have to be able to create connection and find joy in doing so without needing it to get anywhere. And then once we've done that, we have to be willing to get curious about this person's possibility on the planet without needing it to go anywhere. And then we build on that. For anyone listening, and yourself included, Jess, I'm happy to share the videos for the course. The course no longer runs. Part of what we did in that course was taught all of this, provided all that foundation, and then did a lot of Zoom coaching where I'd like work with people around this so we could do that, and a lot of engagement. But I've got all the videos for that course. So if you want to reach out, I'm happy to share that with you. You can have access to those. You'll have to do so not by commenting on this, but sending me a message so that it actually gets into my inbox. It's just too easy to step over this stuff. Let's see what you guys have written as I've been talking here. Maria says, the last networking event way back in 2019, I connected with a couple of folks with no motive for business. Then last week, that same person reached out to me because I matched her up with someone who could assist in her business. Last week, I signed her on as a client. No pushy BS. It's a beautiful example, Maria, of like what can happen when we're just genuinely interested in people, when we genuinely connect with them. I can pretty much guarantee you that Mitch, they're not going to get like anything from me because there's no connection there. I bet it's just the same. They might as well be a pop-up ad. And how often do you click through to pop-up ads and choose that, right? You deliberately install blockers so that there are no pop-ups. We don't want to be a pop-up ad. Be someone genuinely interested in the person. Andrew says, probably one of the craziest things about my coaching business in year 2, I've made less money, but my connections are deeper and the work is more impactful. It's all building into something vast and it requires patience. So the hard part is as you relearn a new way of showing up with people and of building rapport, relationship, and all of that, what happens is at first, if you've learned to sell a particular way that's not along this line, you're going to see some of those sales dip. So there is a bit of scarcity, a bit of fear that can show up because it's like, I'm scared to let go of the old way because that got me some results, but we have to do so to create the new way. This often happens in sports where someone that's learned to play a sport on their own, we'll use squash as an example, they'll have a swing that they've learned to play with really well. They've adapted their game around a particular swing, but it's not the optimal way to swing. So maybe they swing with a straight arm. Maybe they come from tennis, and so they don't move their wrist. Whereas in squash, a good stroke, you come through and then you snap your wrist through at the end. That like a whip that allows you to hit that ball really hard. And so those people come into the sport and they can get to this level playing the way they've learned to play, but no further, because it's not the optimal way to swing that racket. And if they want to go beyond this, it's really challenging because they have to stop doing what they've done to relearn how to swing a squash racket. So they fall all the way down. They actually get less good initially before they then start to climb and then surpass where they were before. So we have to be willing to lose some stuff if we really want to take on this game of mastery. And that's scary and challenging. Maria says, if folks approach networking events with the intention of knowing people in their business more instead of making a quick sale, boy, if folks do that, life is way more fun. Networking events become quite fun, and you can it's kind of like being at a wedding. Like, here's a bunch of people I don't yet know. I can be however I want. I can have fun. I can be playful, and people will remember you. That's one of the remarkable things, because you show up as someone way different from the rest of the people there. We all know what it's like at these networking events. You just keep meeting these people. It's very static. Oh, I do this. Oh, what do you do? Great. Tell me about your business. It's very robotic. And it doesn't mean we can't ask those questions, but where we want to get to is like, I'm going to take off the table any notion of leaving with something, of getting anything, of making any bookings or anything. I'm just going to get curious about these people. Andrew, thank you for Andrew's always hyping the Creating Clients course. I really appreciate that, Andrew. And Andrew, thanks for the heads up on the choppiness. Just letting me know my video is choppy. Let me know if that happens again, and I'm glad to hear that I'm back. Jess, you're saying you're the one creating genuine creation and not able to go further. You've been waiting for them to realize they need me and asking so they don't think I've been ingenuous. Yeah. So that's where the next step would be possibility. And then as we ask people about possibility and get curious about that, what naturally flows from there is an opportunity to serve them. Oh, well, what I'd really love to do is this, but that's just really hard with the factors of my life. Oh, well, that's kind of fascinating. And I'm really interested in that. And that's what I do. I support people with that. Do you want to have a conversation with me where we just look at that? My gift to you. So from there, an invitation can become quite natural. Okay, let's talk about what Adam Franchy brought, which is another great topic, and one I really like because it's one that can be challenging there's a lot of misinterpretation in this area. So Adam writes, Adam, can you talk, he's talking to me, Adam Quiney, can you talk about the masculine's role in creating safety and security for the feminine in intimate relationships? The masculine's role in holding space and remaining present for the feminine without going into the default judgment, shame, staying open and staying present. So we got to set some groundwork here, because as soon as we use terms like masculine and feminine, it's going to be sticky. So I'm going to switch our terms, and I'm going to explain why. We're going to use alpha to describe masculine and omega to describe feminine. These are two qualities of energy, like the positive and the negative poles on a battery. They're both forms of electricity, but they're also different, like I don't know what'd you call that? The chirality, I think is the term, or the directionality, or whatever it is that makes them, that they're the same energy, but they're different. Much like the nature of alpha and omega energies universally. So many of you probably heard me lay this out a little bit in the past, but we're going to do it quickly again. Alpha energy is the energetic quality of resting consciousness. It is transcendence and consciousness of the moment. So the alpha energy rises up to transcend and to hold all of it. So it is the emptiness of the universe. It is the void. It is consciousness, and it is also purposefulness and direction. There's a penetrative quality, a linear quality to it. The omega energy, which often is called feminine energy, is the energy of the moment. It is whatever is felt in the moment. There is not transcendence. There cannot be transcendence when you are deeply embodying the omega, because you are immersed in the moment. So the omega energy goes down into the moment. So alpha rises up and transcends, omega drops down and feels and experiences. Neither of these energies is better. Neither of these energies is like, you should have more of this or more of that or anything along those lines. We're just distinguishing two qualities of energy that are almost like primordial. These are kind of like, if you even look in the Bible or places like this, in the beginning there was dark and then there was light created. So the dark was the alpha and the light was the omega. So from there, we can start to look at Adam's question, which is like, he's really asking, I should add a little bit more. People who identify as a masculine gender, people who identify as men or have a penis, more often than not are more embodied as the alpha energy. And people who identify as the female gender, call themselves women or have a vagina, more often than not have more omega energy, that they just their natural state of embodiment. But to be clear, we all have like both of these energies inside of us. That means is that like more men typically will have more of like their natural resting state will be with more of that alpha kind of quality, more directionality, more linearity, more penetrative kind of consciousness, and their tendency will be less towards relationship and more towards like, let me just rest. This is why some practitioners talk about the chief desire of the masculine, or in our language now, the chief desire of the alpha is freedom. I want to be freedom from all the burdens, all of the energy of the world and all of the stuff I have to do, get that off my shoulders so I can just rest in my peace. I can just be on my track. I can be on purpose. The omega energy tends more towards the moment, towards experience and relationship and dancing with whatever is going on. And so we've got those two things. So now Adam's asking, like, what is the masculine energy or the alpha energy's role in creating safety and security for the omega? So the trap here is that we hear this question through the lens of what's the man's role in creating safety and security for the woman's role. And the real challenge is that a lot of people take this esoteric conversation, these concepts we've laid out, and they apply it wholesale to man and woman and always on. So we don't have to do anything. I want to pull that apart a bit for us so that we can get a bit more altitude and see this with a little more clarity. First of all, there's no right way to be in relationship. Alpha energy or the alpha practitioner, or put even more succinctly, the person currently holding the alpha energy does not need to do any one thing. I don't need to create safety and security for my woman. That's an option. My woman does not need to dance for me or embody the feminine or anything along those lines. You get to show up however you want in your relationship. The opportunity that is available, the opportunity to step into when we talk about polarity and practice and the yoga of intimacy, is to practice creating polarity with our partner. Creating polarity means that I or Bay or whichever partner chooses to am holding one of those two poles, and my other partner is holding the other pole. So that means I am working to really embody either the alpha energy or the omega energy. There's no right way, but again, at least in my relationship, and often is the case, as a man, identifying as a man, I prefer, and my more natural state is the alpha energy. My woman, her more natural state is the omega energy. And so when we are seeking to create polarity with each other, that means that I am going to really intentionally be in a practice where I am embodying the alpha. And Bay is going to be really in a practice where she's intentionally embodying the omega, not because it's right, not because she's supposed to, not because patriarchally this is what is the right thing to do, or because of all of the conditioning and programming or anything like that, but because doing so in a practice allows us to create polarity. Polarity is that spark between the two poles on a battery. From positive to negative creates a current where energy travels. If both of those poles are the exact same, if you have positive and positive, there is no current. It just sits there dead, like a potato. You can't create a potato battery. So first of all, none of this has to happen, but we choose to practice it. So we want to get out of any of this as a must do, a have to, a should, or anything along those lines. So we can really look at the opportunity available in this kind of yoga, this kind of practice. So that then leads us to, first of all, there's a lot of groundwork we have to lay out. I apologize. I don't apologize. This is part of the conversation. If a man decided to, well, let's talk about polarizing someone. So as either practitioner embodies more and more of one part, like one particular energy, either the man embodies more alpha or more omega, or the partner, that will polarize the other person out to the other side. If I get very deep and still, what's going to tend to happen, deep, still, and present, very conscious, what's going to tend to happen is it's going to polarize the other person to the other side. If I get very in my feminine and start dancing and moving around and having all of this, that's going to polarize my partner into more stillness. That tends to be the way it goes. So it can actually be really obnoxious and, in fact, quite offensive and what's the right word? Inappropriate for us to practice polarizing people without consent, without sort of a shared understanding. Now, this can be kind of sexy and exciting when you're in like an intimate setting with someone. Like there's already an understanding that we're dating, where something is being built. But if I, as a man, were to sit in a cafe and just bring all of my attention, awareness, and resting consciousness to a woman working at a table across from me, that's going to be frightening. It's going to be offensive. It's going to be intrusive. So none of what we're talking about here exists when like this isn't sort of like just go and do this and you'll get all the women in the world and you'll fuck more. Not at all the case. In fact, that's totally off the mark. The opportunity is when the polarity arises, how do we become more artful and masterful in it? So I think I can finally start to answer Adam's question now that we've laid all of that out, which is in the moment when we are creating polarity, what is the role of the alpha energy in creating safety and security for the feminine energy? You can create polarity anytime. And when you're in relationship with your partner, you might have to enroll them in this, or you can just start to, like, as the alpha, you can start to like be more still. Or if you're wanting to embody the omega, you can start to like practice with adornment or movement or like, like singing or feeling the pleasure of the moment, regardless of what your partner is doing. And that's going to naturally polarize them out. The role for the alpha energy in terms of safety and security, which is what Adam's asking about, is that the omega energy needs to feel held. It wants to be witnessed. It desires a degree of container from the alpha energy. Like the universe and stars being born and expanding, they require something to expand into. And what most alpha practitioners, what most men, if we use that term, they have zero capacity to hold space for the omega practitioners' fullness. If we couch this into typical gender roles, the way this looks is that most men complain that their woman is not like feminine enough and juicy enough. But then when the woman starts to express stuff or create a mess or like start to complain, which is every bit a part of the omega's experience of the moment as anything else, the man shuts her down. So stop complaining. All you ever do is complain. It's annoying. Why can't you just be happy? That doesn't provide any opportunity for the omega to just practice, to just express herself. It shuts her down. So what happens is then the omega practitioner closes and gets tighter, and then the alpha practitioner gets frustrated and we get caught there. So the alpha energy, the person holding the alpha pole, their role, their job is to be still like a mountain or like a lighthouse in the face of the storms of the omega. Allow all of what the omega practitioner brings, and can I be open to it? Can I let it impact my heart while remaining strong and still and sturdy for them? Can I be a trustable man or woman, whatever you identify as? But whoever is holding alpha, what we look for in an alpha practitioner is trust. I can trust this person. I can show them absolutely everything in my heart. I can show them my resentment, my contempt. I can show them my love. I can show them my anger and my rage. I can show them my ecstasy. And I know that they will stand here and be able to receive it and let it in, while at the same time not leave me, not drop me, and just let me fall and hit the ground once I've shown them. That's the role of the alpha. And what the omega craves is to be loved and to express love. What alpha wants from omega is love. Show me your fullness. Show me all of you. Allow me to see every last inch of your heart, everything that's in there. Can I see all of this? So I'm not sure how well I'm doing explaining this. These are fairly esoteric concepts. Adam, if you want any elaboration, let me know. The heart of this is that ultimately that is the role of the alpha when you are practicing polarizing and holding space with your partner. The role of the alpha practitioner is to be, how much capacity do I have to be open-hearted and strong-backed? So often when you go to workshops, you'll see men. Typically, the way it goes in workshops is most of the alpha practitioners are men and most of the omega are women. Not because it's right, it's just what tends to be the case. So you see many men, and it's like, we're going to do an exercise where the women are going to share all of their heart, every last drop, and the men are going to receive it, be strong and still, and let it in. And what you tend to see a lot of is, if the women play full out and allow all of this to go, you end up with a lot of men like this. Like, it's kind of like you can feel the clench in their stomach muscles. You can feel the shallowness in their breath. You can feel the grit in their teeth. You can feel their tension. You can feel it in me right now, or at least I can see it. So they receive everything like this, as opposed to receiving it like this, with soft eyes and open heart and deep, deep breath and soft stomach muscles. And that's the difference. It's so subtle and nuanced, but energetically it's completely conveyed. So you end up with a lot of men that they believe they're practicing alpha when in fact they are shut down to the world. So they're kind of like a concrete wall, as opposed to, maybe more accurately would be almost like not like a reed, well, a little bit like a reed, like able to allow that wave to smash into us and to feel it all in our heart. So it's not that we're immovable, or at least unimpactable, but that we will stand firm for that other person we're practicing with in the face of whatever they bring to us. Okay. I want to I want to talk about dual relationships, I think, next. There's a few reasons for this. One is that we're starting the Forge in 2 weeks, we begin. And so this is a bit of a conversation we look to. And so when I talk about a dual relationship in the context of leadership and coaching, what I'm talking about is any situation where you have a coach and a client, or a leader and someone they are leading, they're developing their leadership. And then in addition to that, you're welcome, Adam, you have an additional, like a side chain kind of relationship. So an additional relationship. Sorry, my nose hair is making me trip over my words. Stop that nose hair. So it's like, a classic example would be me coaching my family member, me coaching my friend, me leading someone, developing their leadership, and then getting into an intimate relationship with them. If you go on coaching message boards or coaching groups in Facebook and you ask the question, should you coach your friends? You'll get a great deal of variety of answers on this. I want to invite people into a powerful way to play in this conversation. So this applies everywhere. Like, you can see it with recently, a software company locally had let people go because there was, I guess we could call it impropriety. Basically, someone who had a position of authority got into a relationship with someone. It didn't really go the way they wanted it to. It ended. That person ended up leaving. Drama, drama, drama. So you see this all over the place. And at the highest levels, we could even well, let's not go down the path of predatory stuff because that's a bit different, although there is definitely some overlap. But the point here is that when you are coaching someone or when you are developing someone's leadership, you have almost like a fiduciary duty. Fiduciary meaning like a relationship of trust, like a responsibility that you act in a certain way. You have this duty to stay off the court with them. What that means is that with my client, if I'm somehow enmeshed in my client and let's say that I set up a relationship with them where they're like, I have no idea how to pay you, Adam, but can we start working together and you're going to help me get the money and then I'm going to pay you each month with the money you get me. It's going to be great. We're both going to be enrolled in me making the money and it's going to be awesome. So now I'm enmeshed in that client. I can no longer be impartial. I can't be objective. I fucking need that money. So I get into their world. I get up in their grill. I get on the court with them. It's like the coach getting onto the basketball court and being like, no, 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 throw it this way, do it this way. It doesn't work. It takes away our ability to be objective and off the court with altitude for our clients. So the heart of any coaching or leadership conversation is that's the soul and the spirit of this transformational work, is that we can be free of any agenda for our client. I don't need them to be this way. I don't need them to be that way. I'm totally clean about them making all the mistakes in the world. If they want to run their face right into a tree for 7 weeks and insist to me that this is not harming them, then my job is to work myself out so I can be like, yeah, okay, got it. It looks different to me, but I'm hearing you say that you're not harming yourself. What do you want to do next? Run into the tree. Okay, great. Let's give it another go. What coaches and leaders tend to insist is no, 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 no. I can handle this. Or the other way this shows up is that they say things like they make reasons why the client wouldn't be a yes to this kind of work unless it was their friend. So the way that sounds is kind of like, well, I think it's different because this person I work with, my friend, they just aren't open to coaching otherwise. And so I'm the only person that they would work with. And as a result, I'm supporting them by giving them something they wouldn't otherwise get. So it's kind of a little bit like a better than nothing, right? Like, yeah, this might be flawed, but this is the best they'll get because if I didn't do this, they would have no coaching and that would be worse than having coaching. So what's happening there is that people are like, the coach is buying into the client's scarcity. So rather than the coach saying, like, really standing for the possibility of coaching and free of any agenda, enrolling that person and working with someone else, like, look, coaching's amazing and it changes lives and it's transformed my life completely. And I want you to get that gift. It's going to be a diminished gift if you work with me. And there are many, many phenomenal coaches I would love to put you in touch with. And I want to stand for that for you so that you can get access to the abundance and the possibility that is available in this transformational work called coaching. Would you like to have a conversation about that? So that's me standing for this person, not to stop at good enough. Yeah, you could have some work with me and it would be better than nothing. But why am I, as your coach, kind of buying into your story of good enough? Isn't my job to stand for the possibility in your life? Like, you can have it all. And so hopefully what you can see is that when people make this kind of exceptionality, oh, it's better, they wouldn't even work with a coach if not for me, or the only way, they insist that they're not buying into their clients' limiting beliefs, while at the very same time are doing exactly that. The very relationship is founded upon your buying into their limiting beliefs. So this often happens with coaches that aren't working with their own coach or that are enmeshed in the same way with their coach. And it's self-defeating, like self-contradicting. And so it just doesn't work. And so too with leadership conversations, like this idea, like, it's natural if you're really standing for someone's leadership, you're going to get very intimate with them. And that intimacy, we can often confuse it with arousal or love. Whenever we do the forge, I should distinguish that a little bit better, like romantic love as opposed to platonic love. So anytime we do the Forge, anytime we used to lead coach training with accomplishment coaching, as people stood for each other's leadership, they see each other in a way that is rare in the world. The world is not set up around a conversation about really seeing each other and standing for each other. That's not the way the world operates. It's just not the default conversation. Not wrong, just not the default. And if you go out into the world and try to have those conversations, most people are going to find that pretty obnoxious. They're going to find it kind of like, again, you jumping into intimacy that's not really there. Go ahead and try it if you don't believe me. Go to your friend and be like, hey, I noticed you're doing this thing, and reflect it to them and see how it lands without any prefacing. So in the leadership version of the same conversation, you end up with people that start to become very intimate with the people they're supporting, but then they cross the line and they start to get enmeshed in a relationship with them. And what they can't see is that they're no longer going to be able to stand for that person. They can't, because now instead of being able to just stand for that person's possibility, there's this complicating factor, a confounding variable, which is the romance. And like, well, if I reflect this to them, how are they going to feel about that? And I know that they're really struggling with their mom and their dog, and they're sad about that. So how can I do all this stuff? And then, it all starts to fall to pieces. Not to mention the complication of the fact that as a leader standing for someone, you have a great deal of their trust imbued in you. Anytime I'm developing someone's leadership, there is a degree of sacred trust that they impart to me. And the way this sacred trust shows up is that there's going to be a point where I can see something that they can't by virtue of their blind spots. And the way a blind spot works is not that you have someone tell you this is in your blind spot and you go, oh yeah, I can see that's in my blind spot. The way a blind spot works is it stops you from seeing that you can't see. Put differently, you're blind to the fact that you're blind. It's not just that you're blind. It's two levels. And so anytime someone says, hey, you're blind to this, you can't see you're blind to it. So you're going to look and be like, I don't think so. I'm checking. I can see everything. Like even in this moment, you and I connecting with each other, our eyes have a blind spot. Point your blind spot out to me. You can't see it. I can tell you about it. A doctor can show us a schematic with our eye showing where the optic nerve connects and show that there's a blind spot, but we can't see it in our field of vision. We have to trust it beyond what our senses tell us. That's the nature of a blind spot. And so anytime I'm leading someone, I'm standing for their leadership, there is going to be a degree to which they actually have to trust my reflection beyond their own experience in the moment. Now, I'm not talking about throwing out their sovereignty altogether, but I'm talking that there are parts along the journey of transformation where they will have to trust my reflection beyond their own resistance to that reflection. I'm going to point to something and say, I think this is in your blind spot. And everything that they can see is going to say, no, it's not. And they're going to have to trust me over that. Now, my job as leader is to honor that trust, to hold it with reverence and sacredness, and not to insist on it, to let them come to trusting me in their own time. But the point of this is, if you're in relationship romantically with someone, that's a degree of power that then leads to stuff like gaslighting. Because then I can start to be like, well, I think this is your blind spot, and blah, 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 blah. And well, you just don't want to have sex, and that's in your blind spot. And there's an imbalance of power. So it just falls to pieces for so many reasons. So all of this to say, please, 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 if you are someone committed to mastery in the realms of leadership, coaching, transformation, please really take on dual relationships, not because it's a rule that you should follow. I mean, we could make it a rule and it would be a good rule, but that's a weak reason to follow along with something like this. Please take to heart this notion of stepping beyond dual relationships because of what's possible beyond that. And because you are committed to that possibility for the world, as opposed to following a rule. Don't do it to follow a rule. Do it because you so believe in leadership and transformation and coaching that you are willing to stand for that possibility for everyone and to do everything in your power to avoid sabotaging it. That's how dual relationships work. And that's what I invite you to step into. Andrew, I'm just going to read some of what you shared here. It's been an interesting place to explore lately where I've been challenged to be more flexible in how I'm looking at commitment, financial capacity, etc. As I've mentioned before, you have a certain way of, as Adam, have mentioned before, Andrew says, I've had a certain way of enrollment in my coaching business, and now breaking that down to create something different is quite a thing to sit with. Yes. And the blind spots aspect is fascinating. It's something I see, but don't think I've voiced enough in the conversations I'm having. The really hard part about a blind spot is no amount of talking about it will give me the experience of seeing it. Visually, you and I can talk about the fact that we have a blind spot for the rest of our life until we die, and at no point will it become apparent in our field of vision that that the blind spot is right there. There it is. At no point. So on some level, no matter how close we talk about it, there will be a degree of trust required. There is no getting past that fact. We cannot see that we cannot see. We are blind to the fact that we are blind. And so therein lies mastery, is a willingness to accept that fact and then to seek out and commit to working with people that we trust enough to reflect those places to us. That's really tough. Most people choose out of it, choose not to do it. It takes a great degree of courage to be a yes to that, to choose into that. 11:15. I've got a little bit of extra time today, so let's do a choose your own deep dive. So I asked what ways of being would you guys like to see us deep dive into? I'm just going to have a quick check here. Okay, so we've got a few suggestions from Andrew and Evan. Thank you both for your suggestions. It's cool. You guys each gave 3. So Evan says power, champion, wisdom, and Andrew says magic, spirit, possibility. Adam, can you elaborate on what you mean there? Breakthrough versus blind spot distinction? Let's see. So let's talk about power. I think power is the one I want to go with. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start with a particular quality of light, and we're going to trace how the way you wind up in life gets created from that starting point. Power is the quality of being. So first of all, let's talk about just that as a quality of being. Power as a way of being, people with the quality of power, they are people, there's many ways that their innate way of being might express itself. So the surface stuff might be just physically, they're powerful. They have a broad physique. There's like just an energetic quality of like power to them. They may have a powerful penetrative voice or like a booming voice. They may be like the shape of their eyes in their face. You can kind of sense like a determination, a strength of, whatever. The interesting thing is that people will often say, Adam, that's just superficial. That's completely random. There's no linkage between that. And that's how I used to hold it too. I was like, sort of like how, you being attractive has nothing to do with what's inside. Actually, I disagree these days. The energy of who we be is manifest in ourselves physically. And I don't even know how that works, but that's just the experience I find. And as people deepen in this work, the experience they find. So you're free to dismiss this, but I would invite you to try this on, to start noticing, like, if I just looked at this person superficially, what qualities of being do I sense? And then see if that checks out with the way they show up in the world. And I think what you'll find is actually they kind of do. So power, physically, there's a potency to their presence. Energetically, a potency to their presence. They're kind of like this energy that these people will break through whatever is in their way, whether it's like a blade of grass growing up through concrete or a football player smashing through the line of scrimmage. That is the energy of power. These are people that when you put them on a project, that project is going to move forward over hell or high water, whatever the obstacle that gets put in the way, for better and for worse. So if you confront power if you take an unstoppable object and put it in front of an immovable object, it's going to do this. So that's the part that's a little bit worse. That can be the downside to power. So this is the notion of the juggernaut. The juggernaut is, it's an X-Men character, but also a mythological. I think it's initially Hebraic, Hebrew, was this sort of quality, this being, this entity that was just unstoppable and forever moving. You could never stop its movement. So that is the energy of power. You've probably met people like that. I'll just try to think of Terry Crews might be a good example. I mean, he embodies a lot of other stuff, but he'd be a good quality example. Trying to think. The trouble with celebrities is they're either often actors or singers, or you can see a lot of like power in people that are in like sports lend themselves naturally to people with a lot of power. So in rugby, you see a great deal of power. In mixed martial arts, there's a whole variety of different stuff. Quinton Rampage Jackson, if you ever followed MMA, he was a great example of power, as was like, who are some other people? I can't think of any MMA fighters off the top of my head. I'm kind of out of date there, but like, you get the idea. So we start with this quality of energy of power. What happens is that we are that light, and then we end up with two fears about our particular quality of being. And those fears are that we are not enough or we're too much. That's ultimately like, for power, the way that looks is like, I'm afraid that I'm not being powerful enough, that I'm being a wimp, that I'm being weak or floppy. The reason power would fear that is because it's the negation of itself. If who you are innately on some level energetically is power, then to be weak, to be a wimp, to be a coward, to be floppy and nothingness, that would be kind of like the negation of who you are. And the other thing that people with power fear is being too much. So you can imagine, right? Like someone who naturally has power, it's a bit like a bull in a china shop. They just cause wreckage. There's an impact to everything we do in the world. And people who are innately power, who innately embody power, they have a greater impact. And so there becomes this fear like, I caused too much collateral damage. I'm afraid of being too much. I don't want to hurt people, because all of us have a nice big beating heart in our chest, even if we aren't aware of that. People with power can feel that impact and then worry, fuck, I'm too much. So our core fears typically are like this. They become either we become afraid of not being enough of what we are, or of being too much of what we are. They kind of wrap down into the center. It's like a horseshoe shape. So those become our fears. And then so we started with our light, then we created like these two core fears. And then from there, we create compensating strategies. And there's usually one strategy on either side. So for those people that are afraid of being a wimp, afraid of being not powerful enough, they decide, fuck it. I'm not willing to quell myself. I'm not willing to be weak. That is not what I'm about. And to be clear, they get this kind of training growing up too. So they probably have parents themselves which embody these qualities, and these parents would train them the same way they were trained by their parents. So don't be a wimp, man up, show up, get your stuff, whatever, that sort of training. So from being afraid of being weak and cowardly and whatever, they overcompensate. They show up like, fuck it. Anytime there's a fear that they might be like perceived as wimpy, let's say that something happens on the playground and they get shoved and fall down, and they're like, it's not a big deal, whatever. We were just playing around. But then when that fear gets kicked off, they jump to the strategy, which is kind of an overcompensation. You push me down, fuck you, you're going down. And they dump the person on their ass. Now, this overcompensation from their fear has an impact, which is that it hurts people. It causes collateral damage. And so, in addition to a reactive kind of like, gotta be super powerful thing, they also develop this ability to shut their heart down so they can be okay with the impact of their compensatory strategy. I'm afraid of looking like a wimp. I'm afraid of not being powerful enough, of being weak, of being puny. So therefore, kind of unconsciously, when that fear is triggered, there's a compensatory reaction. And because that reaction has an impact that they don't really like, that kind of empathetically hurts them, the solution there is not to change this pattern, because most of this is unconscious, but shut down the heart or make reasons, justifications. Well, I'm sorry that you got hurt there and that I really caused you pain, but like, that's your fault. You started it there. Now I don't have to feel bad about my impact. And I reassert my sense of power. So from the fear, of being weak and impotent and whatever, you can see their strategy actually loops them all the way back to the other side, where they're kind of the expression of being too much, of causing collateral damage everywhere. And you can hopefully see from this compensatory strategy and the way it has them shut their hearts down, they're less and less able to be present to the impact of this strategy. And consequently, they're more and more likely to do it. If I can't feel the harm I'm causing, then I'm less likely to stop causing that harm. So that's the first step. They go from a fear about this not enoughness to then being too much. On the other side, we've got this person who's afraid of being too much, afraid of being too powerful. So maybe they were raised by parents that had been trained by their parents to kind of be that gentle giant. You ever been around people like that? They're huge. They've got a lot of power. You can feel it in them, but they're almost like a wimp. They're nice on nice on nice. They're super, super, super nice. And they go out of their way to explain to you how they're not going to be a harm and all of that stuff. So what they've done is they've learned to compensate in the opposite direction. They've gone all the way around to kind of gelding themselves. They've castrated themselves. All of their power is gone. They show up like a little wimp. Have a sip of tea here. Now, the trouble with this strategy is that when you try to shut down some aspect of who you are, it's like, what's a good example here? In pressure cookers, they have a little valve, a rocker valve, that lets out some of the air. But if you shut that valve and lock that pressure cooker, there's nowhere for that pressure to go. So this is what this compensatory strategy around power is kind of like. They turn their power all the way down. They suppress it so that they never cause harm, because they've learned that the collateral damage that they tend to cause naturally is wrong. They're not going to do that. Fuck no. They were trained out of it, and they've decided that's wrong, and they're never going to be that person. So this is a little bit like having a pressure cooker and then shutting the valve off. What's going to happen? Pressure's going to build, and eventually it explodes. It blows up. You got a bomb on your hands. So this is what tends to happen with those people who go all the way to the other side. They become wimpy because they're afraid of being too much. They become too little. And then as they hang out on this other side, being kind of wimpy, gentle giants, et cetera, what goes on with their power is that it gets directed either inwards, so they are vicious and brutal to themselves, or it gets expressed indirectly in ways that kind of allow it to almost be safe in its expression. So they might be kind of the kindest person in the world to you at the office and so nice, but violently erupt into road rage. Or they might be someone that's like really kind to everyone in their office, but then come home and beat their partner, because this energy has no capacity to be expressed responsibly. It just sits, gets quelled until they explode into rage, do something horrible, and then from there, that proves the very fear that they have. Fuck, I'm a monster. Look at all this problem. And so then they double down. They try to duct tape that pressure cooker and put a pressure cooker around the pressure cooker and shut the valve on that. And of course, all that does is repeat this cycle back and forth. So you get bigger and bigger and bigger eruptions, and quieter and quieter and quieter and wimpier ways of showing up everywhere else in their life. So you can hopefully see from really innocent, honest beginnings. First of all, from a beautiful starting point, like just the gift of power, what our fear does and how it distorts our gifts and then leads to stuff that's the antithesis of what we really want to be. And the end result of this is like, this is how our fear actually can end up creating horrors. It can create what we would deem evil. People end up doing things that we would condemn, being a bully, being brutal, being abusive, all of this stuff. And I'm not at this point saying, therefore, just let them be abusive or anything like that. Not at all. We have to have laws. You don't get to harm people. That's not okay. But simultaneous to having laws and to not allowing harm like this to be visited on people, we also need to find ways to relate to people as the light that began all of this, and to see that all of this is a function of fear happening. When we just condemn someone, we are doing the same thing to them that they're already doing internally. So that person that's decided they're a monster, found evidence by their behavior, and then tries to shut it down even further, they're already doing all the condemnation in the world. And us heaping more on it just reinforces this pattern and keeps them locked in the same thing. So there can be no freedom. There can be no real change from this. What really starts to set people free is for them to notice, like, what's showing up? Hey, Raf, what's showing up that you're afraid of in this moment? And what is that driving up? And can we support you to bring love to that? Can we support you to actually be with that rather than trying to push it down and eradicate it so it never shows up in the first place, which is just the next iteration of that pressure cooker being duct taped. So often, what really sets power free. So we've walked through the light of power, the fears of power, the compensatory mechanisms of our fear, the impact of that fear, and now we're talking about what's the breakthrough look like. Often what the breakthrough looks like for power is, first of all, getting honest about what's there rather than condemning it. So until we can allow something to show up in the face, in the space, it's hard for us to do anything about it. So part of that for power is, like, people with power are really afraid of their anger, or they're unwilling to acknowledge its presence. Fuck you. I'm right to knock you down on your ass. You came at me first. That's a way of not acknowledging your anger. Yeah, but you retaliated way harder. Can you at least own that you were angry and you were like, that was part of your stuff too? So the first step for power is often owning, allowing, like, oh man, I got anger showing up and it makes me want to hurt someone or do something nasty or like cause damage. And simultaneous to that, to start to be willing to hear and receive feedback about the impact they've had. And then finally, the hard part is to take that feedback on, free of making themselves wrong for it. So typically where people at this stage get caught is they'll start to, okay, got it. I got to, like, one, allow this stuff to come forward, and two, hear the feedback. Okay, I'm going to listen. And the person's like, well, look, you really hurt me. And it kind of, like, my ass is bruised and, you know, it left me feeling like I just don't want to play with you. And then two things will happen. One is they'll dismiss it. Well, fuck you. That's your fault. You shouldn't have come at me in the first place, right? That's a way of not letting the feedback in. So for that approach, we got to, like, set down our own righteous response and instead just get what this person is giving to us. Oh, got it. Like, that was the impact. Is that the impact I want to have in the world? Regardless of how the world's been to me, is the impact I want to have in the world that one? Probably not. And the other side of it is that they'll get that feedback and then they'll whip themselves with it. Oh, fuck. I knew that was the thing I was doing. I hate myself. Why do I do this? I'm such a jerk. And what that does is it also prevents them from getting the impact. Instead, what they do is what they're left with is berating themselves and more self-loathing. Instead of, like, hey, is that the impact I want to have? No. Am I happy I made the impact? No. Can I love myself and can I give myself permission and grace to allow it to be okay that that was the impact I had so I can continue to grow from it? So you can hopefully see kind of the nuance, right? We're walking a very nuanced line here. And this is why hard to do this on our own. So that's how we get from power, the beautiful quality of power, just such a gift. People with power, you put them on a team, that team blasts through roadblocks. It's really remarkable how we get from that incredible gift to the fears that show up around it, the compensatory mechanisms, the consequences, the impact of those mechanisms, and then how we can get caught in there and the breakthrough that actually sets us free. All of that is, like, I've just given you kind of like a mini synopsis of one of the 25 chapters I'm currently editing in Who Do You Think You Are? So we've got kind of that, and it's laid out, there's a little bit more like, how do you work with people like that? And what are some practices you can take on? But 25 qualities of being basically laid out that way. And then the surrounding sections of the book to kind of elaborate on this. So, bladder check. I go a little longer. I think I want to talk, I'm going to just touch a little bit on what you asked for, Adam, which is the distinction. Can I elaborate on, okay, Adam's saying, can I elaborate on the distinction between a breakthrough and a blind spot? Yes, I can. And I will right now, because this is important. Breakthrough is a misused word. people think they're having breakthroughs constantly, and they use this word. It's become jargon. So the nature of any new potent language, any new concept that's potent, is that our our ego will grab a hold of it and simplify it and reduce it and make it kind of like just a neat soundbite, at which point it becomes jargon and it loses its power. So that doesn't mean, great, we need a new word for breakthrough, because then that word will be taken. So it's not about trying to stop this from happening. It's just about creating some rigor in our languaging, creating some rigor in our distinguishing, so we can get clear and start to separate these back out. So often what people think they mean when they use the word breakthrough is awareness. Like if I'm in a conversation with someone and they're like, I really want to get better at creating clients. And so we sit and we start to talk about how that's going and what's in the way and all of that. And they're like, well, I think I just need to start talking to people. And I explore deeper with them. And what they start to see is like, wow, I'm afraid people don't like me. And then as a result of that, I either don't talk to people, or when I do talk to them, I put myself down right out of the gates, so that I've kind of like made that okay for them not to like me. And oh my God, I can totally see how no wonder I'm not creating clients. Oh, this is such a breakthrough. So they've created new awareness for themselves, but there is no breakthrough in awareness alone. Awareness is an essential component. It's an ingredient in the recipe of breakthrough, but it is not a breakthrough in and of itself. Otherwise, reading books, watching videos, and talking to someone for a single conversation and doing ayahuasca would be all you would ever need to do to create breakthroughs in your life, and the world would be transforming constantly. It's not the way it works. It's the hope. In the moment when we have that awareness, it's how it feels, because we have that awareness and we're like, I can't forget this. This is so potent. I can finally see it. Everything's going to shift from here, but not everything will shift from here. I'm going to explain why. That awareness is similar to what people, I think you're talking about, Adam, when you talk about like blind spot. So that awareness is often comes from us finally seeing something in our blind. Oh my God, I've not been able to see this. This is the thing I've been tripping over everywhere for the last like 30 years of my life. I can finally see it. Oh, things are going to be different. Things will not be different until you start acting in alignment of the new way you want to show up in your life. So that person that we just talked about, who can now see, wow, I show up with people afraid they don't like me. First of all, that person gets something out of like the story that people don't like them. Like they don't have to show up fully as themselves, for example, and like let people see all of them and then be rejected there. Maybe what they do is they kind of show up already a little unlikable, and then if someone rejects them, they're like, well, that's fine. It's not really me they're rejecting anyhow, even though you can see this like a lot of countercultures. Goths are a great one. Like when I was going to high school, kind of as I graduated, the goths here became really big, and they'd wear all black hair, face makeup, et cetera, et cetera. What that allowed, or at least what I saw, that there's plenty of good in that, but one of the things that allowed is it gave people the opportunity. Let me come up with a bit of better example that's more personal, so I'm not imputing something onto other people. I can just share for myself. I started going to raves when I graduated, and so I dressed like a raver. I had big ass fat pants, 30-inch bottoms. I wore white gloves because I was a liquid dancer. I wore necklaces and beads that I made or my friends had made for me, and I wore bright, fucking bright colors. And I would show up, and people could immediately reject me for those colors, and then that allowed me to reject them. I didn't have to kind of really be with the pain of them saying, Adam Quiney, you are not enough. I had a facade for which they could reject me, and that was less painful. So this person that might not be creating clients because they're afraid people don't like them, if they want to start acting into this new awareness and being like, great, I'm going to show up fully as me, now they're going to have to confront that fear that actually, what if they themselves get rejected now? There's no longer a facade that they're putting in the way. They're no longer preemptively rejecting themselves so that other people doing the same loses some of its sting. Now they're showing up like, hey, this is all of me. And if someone then rejects them, that's really going to cut to the core. So they've got new awareness, but they haven't yet actually lived into it. And that's where the breakthrough happens. And the way that tends to go is that we have the awareness and then we're like, got it. I'm going to start showing up in my life. I'm going to start being a different way. I'm going to start showing up fully present and giving them all of me and letting them have whatever experience they want to have of me. And as you do so, some people are going to reject you because you're not everyone's favorite flavor of ice cream because the world is abundant and some people love what you have and some people won't. In order for the world to be abundant, that has to be true. If everyone likes you, you are in some way blocking the abundance of the universe. Just consider that. If everyone thinks you're awesome, you are actually stopping some of the abundance available in your life and in the universe. So as you practice this new way of being and showing up fully, some of the abundance in the universe is going to confront you with the very thing you're most afraid of. That's the breakdown. That's the point where you've let go of the old strategies that used to protect you from this fear. And now you can tell they're bankrupt. You're no longer living into them, but you haven't yet created a new way of being. And you're now getting hit in the face with the very thing you are most afraid of, that you set up your life to avoid having. And that's where we're like, fuck, this sucks. And that's the point where most people quit. This isn't getting my life better. My life's getting worse. I don't want to do this. This is crazy. I feel awful. Every time I go and talk to someone, I don't feel more confident. I feel less confident. This certainly isn't helping me get clients. And it isn't, because right now you're in the breakdown. On the other side of this is the point where, in your surrendering to what's going on, in your allowing this to happen, in your releasing your significance about some of the abundance of the world, in this particular example, that people might not like you, you then create this new way of being. Maybe you learn how to connect with people regardless of what they think of you. And from that point on, you can now create connection with people regardless. You don't need them to like you or anything. You can show up to people and they can be like, and you can be like, oh, cool, what's up? I get the sense you don't like me. And you can be in a relationship with them, not kind of being a phony, confident about everything kind of guy, but like genuinely okay with that. That's the breakthrough. And that is a far distance from the awareness. That feels worse. People want the awareness to be enough. People want awareness alone to be a breakthrough, and they will argue with it. They will argue with you often, because if it was just the awareness, that's way safer. There's less edginess. I don't have to feel my own discomfort that shows up when I'm stepping into the breakdown. I don't have to feel sweaty and stressed out and energetic and anxious. None of that has to show up. All I have to do is go sit with my coach, have another interesting conversation, and keep telling myself things are transforming. In fact, what a lot of people will do is they'll actually find ways to justify awareness alone being sufficient. So sometimes what will happen is you'll get clients or direct reports that you're leading that are awareness junkies. And they'll show up and they'll want more awareness and they'll get it. And they'll come back and you'll be like, so what's new? And then they will go and gather paltry evidence. They'll basically get scraps. Be like, oh, my life's changing. Look at these scraps I found from the awareness. It's working. It's working. But all they're really doing is changing the water in their aquarium. They're rearranging the furniture in their apartment. There's no real seismic shift because there's no real breakthrough, because there's no willingness to be in the breakdown. They're just hanging out in awareness. So that's the distinction between breakthrough and blind spot, or breakthrough and awareness or insight. This is the fundamental thing I see with most peak experiences, where people go off to Tony Robbins, they go off and sit in ayahuasca ceremony or plant medicine ceremony, or they go to like a potent intensive, as they're inspired. They're like, oh my God, everything's going to be different, but they don't have any lasting ongoing support. They might even work with a coach for like 6 sessions or something like that, which is great, but that's so little. That's so little time for you to really walk all the way through this kind of journey, this road in front of you. Andrew says, it's interesting because I've been making that connection with books, audios, and how they can create a new awareness, but ultimately don't create long-term change. I don't think I've been able to explain what I see in the differences between awareness and breakthrough. So thanks for that. You're welcome, Andrew. And Andrew says, my Facebook group is all creating awareness. Yeah. I mean, it's important that we not vilify that. All of us want awareness. Awareness rules. It feels so good. But it's the booby prize. It's not to suggest that it's wrong or bad. It's just that there's so much more available, and we want to just kind of distinguish, like, awareness is the start, not the end. And so we can start the race and then walk off and go have hamburgers. That's a totally acceptable way to live our life. But many of us are like, I want to finish the race. And so it's really valuable for us to distinguish awareness as separate from breakthroughs, breakdowns, all of that juice. And do not make anyone wrong for any of this stuff. That can be a bit of a challenge for me sometimes, where I'm like, no, stop this. I want to hit people on the top of the head. Come on, get into the hard stuff. That doesn't help anyone. Okay, let's see. What do I want to plug by way of finishing up? The Forge starts in 2 weeks. You can't be a part of it. Too bad if you want to. It's already full. We're already doing that. But we have a waiting list for next year's Forge. There's about 12 people on it. It doesn't mean that they're registered. It means that they have said, hey, when this next opportunity opens, when you are opening the doors for registration next time, can you let me know? So if you feel like, hey, I'd really like to either know about it now in preparation for that, or I'd like to be one of those people that you reach out to and just let me know when that opens up, send me a message, let me know. We're happy to add you to that. And I'm happy to talk at length about that group and put you in touch with anyone that's done it. It's a life-changing, transformational piece of work. And the last thing is follow me on Instagram, connect with me there, and check out my podcast, Get Lit. If you like audio as your format and you find it hard to sit in front of video, which I do as well, all of these conversations get put onto the podcast. So that's Get Lit, Getlit, Adam Quiney. And in addition to these Friday conversations being there, I also do small 30-minute episodes every week, which are usually taking a single distinction around leadership and breaking it down to support you in being a better leader. Love you guys. I hope you have an amazing weekend, and we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.